In this video, I'm going to do my best to talk you through the sort of thinking process when you're looking to adapt something that you have used or done in your traditional classroom into the online space. And so our central theme here is going to be around choices because you have a lot of choices. So I want you to keep in mind all the choices you have. We often get really honed in on what we know or what we've done. So it's really important to try to think more expansively about all the potential choices available to you. And as I keep saying, keep your teaching goals in mind, not the technology, and also, as you'll see in this case, not the learning object or learning artifact as it's always been. So here's a common learning object that you'd see in elementary education, and a lot of times we use these where they have graphics, they have a nice layout and design, they're engaging for students, and they, I think, work really well for students in the face-to-face classroom when they're working through a concept. But I want to tell you this story about I was talking with an elementary school educator who had something similar to this. And when I came by to sort of give her some advice or to ask her what she was working on, she was working on trying to figure out how students were going to write on this as a PDF. And if you think about it, that's pretty complex, right? Many of us don't know how to annotate or to write on a PDF, and it's probably going to take at least one, if not two, applications that a student would have to use and be familiar with on the computer outside of Canvas, outside of their learning management system. And so this faculty member was getting really frustrated because she was focusing so much on the technology and how to make this, as it literally is, work in the online space. And so what I did was I sort of sat with her and walked through some questions that I'm going to share with you now as a way to think through how we could take this and what's sort of like at the essence of this type of a worksheet or this type of a learning activity and bring that to the online space in a way that makes it as simple as possible for students, but still retains the learning that needs to happen. So here's our first set of questions that I ask these questions of faculty all the time when I sit with them and try to help them figure out what tools are best and what choices they have in taking their materials and learning experiences from the traditional face-to-face classroom and interpreting that into the online space. So you can ask yourself these questions. So what is the fundamental goal of this activity? What student learning outcomes does this align with? And what is it that you really need to make sure that students are practicing and can do and demonstrate from doing this activity? What skills do the students need to demonstrate as they do this? And how do they need to demonstrate those skills? So there's your first block of questions that I want you to think about. When we look at this activity and I ask those questions, what is the goal of this? Well, it's to read sentences and determine if it is one type of sentence or another type of sentence. So doing some sort of linguistic interpretation there and looking at language. And then, a question about the skills. Is it crucial that students need to use handwriting to complete this activity? Is that crucial to this or not crucial to that? And in this case, it really probably isn't. It's really asking just for a T or an A, right? It's a telling sentence or an asking sentence. And so those are really crucial questions for me to ask when I'm giving advice about a tool, because that is going to determine whether it is appropriate to use something like a PDF annotation tool where a student could be showing their handwriting, although as we all know, that can be pretty hard in a digital space, but just as an example. Or whether perhaps this could be recreated inside the learning management system somehow so that students can still see this content, access this content, but maybe in a slightly different form, and maybe they are providing their responses in a slightly different form. Our first group of questions were all about goals, which is where we should always start so we know what needs to be demonstrated. These next group of questions are actually founded in student interaction and engagement. So this first, and this is a really important question for you to be able to answer, and this is also why you should plan on paper. Plan the tools you're going to use first before you actually start building those tools in Canvas. So is this private work? And what I mean by that is this an assignment that students should be showing to each other and are going to benefit from seeing each other's work? Or is this something, so for example, a test that has specific answers, or closed questions with specific answers that students just need to show their teacher that they can arrive at? So if it's private work where it should just be between the student and the instructor, then you would want to choose either an assignment in Canvas, because that's something that only the student and instructor see, that's private interaction, or the quiz tool in Canvas, because again, students don't see each other's quizzes. If this was something where students should see each other's, then you would probably want to choose a discussion forum in Canvas, because that is the tool where students can openly share their work with each other and comment on it. So if you wanted to do something like peer review, you would want to use a discussion forum. So this is one of the most important questions you want to consider when choosing the right tool in your learning management system. You always want to ask yourself if there are opportunities for students to show multiple ways of learning. And then, of course, how are you going to grade and give feedback on this? Because again, that comes back to the tool that you choose. So if you want feedback to happen immediately for students and automatically, for example, then you would need to build a quiz, because only a quiz can do that. If you have students submitting something where you want to annotate and make substantial comments, then you would need to use the assignment tool in Canvas. So looking at this once again, an example of students showing learning in multiple ways, let's say that what we did was we decided we were going to rebuild this in a discussion forum in Canvas. And so up at the top of the discussion forum, we would write out these questions, write out the instructions, and then students in the discussion forum could have different ways of showing their work. So for example, an option could be that students could print this out and they could do this by hand. They could scan, with a phone app, you can scan a picture and then upload a file. Obviously, a parent would be helping with that, but if you have a student who really wants to interact with this physical object, you could give that as an option. Another very simple option is that students could type their responses to each of these right into the text box in the Canvas discussion forum and post it there. And then maybe a third option is that students could use the video or audio recording tools in Canvas to verbally say their responses. And I'm sure there are even more. So this is an example of the way that you can really think about all the choices you have when it comes to students demonstrating their work in multiple modalities. And here you really want to choose what's best for you. How do you want to receive this? How do you want to give feedback? But as much as possible, you do want to give students and families choice about the way that they complete an assignment or an activity, if at all possible. Our last group of questions are going to all be about simplifying. So think about how many clicks it's going to take for a student to get into an activity or into a material you have for them. You want to reduce the number of clicks as much as possible. So for example, you may want to embed a Google Doc right into Canvas rather than having students click a link, maybe then have to click another link and go outside of Canvas into another application. As much as possible, try to keep students with the fewest number of tools possible. I don't recommend trying to use many different tools and applications. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Keep students in Canvas if you at all can, and think about how many times they need to click to accomplish their goals or what they need to do for an activity or to access a resource. Look very closely at your instructions and maybe get some feedback from a peer or ideally a student who could look and give you some feedback. Are you clearly telling students the purpose of the assignment and how it's connected to something else? Are you clearly telling students the task of that assignment and maybe the steps involved, and are they sequential? Is there a way of sort of organizing that for students? Not that you're giving away to students, the sort of how to do the hard learning part of the assignment, but make sure that the how to do this assignment, how to submit this assignment, all of those procedural questions are answered and all of the logistical questions are answered. Are you clearly saying when the due date is? Are you clearly telling students what the criteria for evaluation and grading will be? Make sure your instructions are as clear and thorough as possible. And then finally, how are you communicating both with students and then especially for younger students, also those who are helping them, so parents or families or guardians, those who are supporting them in their learning, because those are two very different audiences. And my guess is that you need to find ways to clearly communicate with both audiences. And our very last, most important question, what this all revolves around, is how to make this as simple as possible on the technology side. We really don't want to aim for fancy technology. Believe me, trust me, you want to keep this as simple as possible while remaining engaging and meeting your teaching goals and your student learning outcomes, your student learning goals. So thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful in thinking through all of those many choices that you have.